Mark here for another great Wisdom and Knowledge 5 podcast. And I'm just so thrilled to bring on Leesa Csolak. Leesa, welcome to the podcast. And let us start out by, you explaining how you got into the industry.
Oh, okay. And thank you so much for having me, Mark. This
Sure.
is
It's
just
my
great.
honor.
I'm thrilled to know that you've done a little bit of this type of
Hmm.
work, which is exciting. Yeah, it's interesting. I think I knew when I was very, very young, like very young, that I had an affinity for the industry myself. And through my youth and my teen years, I was supported by my parents in regard to the arts, but only on a recreational level. They were very much, I was very successful in the endeavors that I was involved with at the time, but they were very academically oriented parents. And so they were constantly reiterating to me that the industry, going into the performing arts industry in whatever regard, was not sustainable. It was not respectable. It was something that you just don't do.
Hmm.
And so because at the time there were no computers, no internet, no phones, we didn't have all of this communication that we have now. Um, you listened to the small circle of people you were surrounded by. And therefore, whatever those people were saying, especially if they were your elders, and we were also brought up in a very strict environment as well back then. I think most people were that are my age. And so we did as we were told. And I do regret at this time in my life, and even, more a few years back, I regret that I didn't have a stronger personality. I was like a people pleaser. In school, I
Hmm.
was getting, all A's and a couple of B's every semester, all through school. And I was very academically I had that affinity for academics as well. So they were very much into steering me toward doing something in academia. So
Hmm.
I went to a, a college university program. I went through that. And I started out as an engineering biology double major because I didn't have bioengineering at the time. I ended up coming out of school after spending the majority of my college years just looking at the collegiate experience as an extension of high school. Like this was something I had to do, that was something that was required. And I took every chance I could to sneak into New York City because
Hmm.
I grew up in a rural town in New Jersey,
Hmm.
about an hour as the crow flies to Midtown Manhattan. And so yeah, I snuck into the city a lot. I have to admit that I snuck into the city on buses and trains from when I was like 15, 16. My parents are turning over in their grave right now because I never
Hmm.
told them. They thought I was somewhere else, and I was sneaking into the city to take dance at Broadway Dance Center and steps. And I also had vocal training at the Met with a gentleman from Romania. His name was Barbu Dumitrescu, that I got connected to through other, kind of networking. And every chance I got, I was doing something with directing, producing, performing. I was doing all of that. And I ended up
Hmm.
landing very, very pretty solidly in the directing, producing side of things while I was in college. I got involved in the Miss America preliminary pageant system at the time, which was, it was a different time and place back then, but I was involved in that in regard to helping to produce some of the preliminary pageants toward that. The winners would go into Miss New Jersey at the time and into that circuit. I was doing that. I had a lot of different things thrown at me. It wasn't like I was looking for them. Someone met me, saw my work, or worked with me on something else. And through networking, I ended up having opportunities to do a world tour and be involved in directing and producing that. I ended up working in Lincoln Center. John Carlo Minotti, who is a composer, he wrote a comic opera called The Hero. And through other networking means, they ended up getting in touch with me, and I ended up choreographing a section of the opera where the dancers would normally come out. I ended up recruiting some friends and people that I knew to be in the opera. So I had an opportunity to do that, which was crazy because I was still in college. I might have been a freshman or sophomore in college. And when that happened, I remember being in an elevator with Robert Redford and Carolyn Kennedy after I think it was I think it was before the show
Hmm.
started, and having a kind of a quick conversation. They talk about, your elevator speech or whatever, but in the business, you're really not supposed to do that kind of thing in an elevator, honestly. Like, the kind of
No.
rule of thumb is you don't do that. But I just kind of had a, quick conversation. Hello, enjoy the show, blah, blah, blah. And there was this after party. And because, again, different world, different place, my parents were more like, no, you need to come home after the party. Like, you don't want to stay. You're a young woman. This was before Giuliani had cleaned up New York City, so
Hmm.
it was a pretty messy place. If you've ever seen the TV show The Deuce, have you ever seen that show on TV? It was a series. It was on the streaming, networks.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't
So it's
remember
more
which one it
recent
was.
than, an older
It was
show.
back, yeah, it was back a few years ago, but
Okay.
it showed kind of what it was like 42nd Street in that area, and
Okay.
what that lifestyle was like, and
Hmm.
that was what it was like back in the
Hmm.
early 80s. So yeah, I ended up not going to the party because my parents said, no, 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 it's not going to be safe for you. You need to just come
Hmm.
home, which is what I did. I did what I was told. I came home. So
Sure.
sadly, I did not know enough about the networking that would have happened had I participated in that after party,
Hmm.
that would have given me more opportunity and more work. So we fast forward to getting out of college, met somebody in college, ended up getting married much earlier than anybody would these days. Settled in another county in New Jersey, rural area, very equestrian, a lot of farms. And I ended up opening up, I ended up with two locations of a very strong performing arts school. And what I did was I took a lot of my friends that I met in New York at these various events, or the choreographers that were working for the Miss America circuit, and I would bring different people that I knew from the industry into my school to help teach. And of course, I was teaching. I was doing, we had acting classes, voice, and also, of course, dance. And so I brought a lot of them in to work with the students, and a lot of them didn't have agents or managers. And I would say to them, what are you doing? Like, you're so good. Like, why are you teaching? Like, do you want to do this professionally? And ultimately, they just didn't know where to turn. They didn't know how to find an
Hmm.
agent. They didn't know how to find a manager. They didn't really know how the industry worked from the inside. And so I just took it upon myself, using that analytical side of my brain. I decided I'm going to learn about this. So there used to be this book. It was a very thick book. It was called the Madison Avenue Guidebook. Have you ever heard of that?
Sounds real familiar.
It was around for a very long time before we had internet access, right? Before
Hmm.
everything was online. And in that book, it had everyone who worked in the industry, pretty much all the agents, all their contact information, what kind of talent they represented. All the managers were in there, producers, directors, casting offices. There were even all the names of, like, prop houses, like if you were going to put a show together, like where you would find the props or where you could rent them from, costumers, costume makers, even set designers, people who built the sets, not just the designers, like everyone was in there. So I ended up stumbling upon this book in a library, and started researching and teaching myself and going, okay, how does this really work? What's going on? So at that point, I was helping my teachers that I had in my school. I was helping them to get agents, and they would get signed. And we would do everything necessary to get them an interview in the offices. And a lot of them ended up working. And then, of course, I lost them as teachers for the
Hmm.
school because they ended up doing professional work and going off to, wherever. Some moved to LA, some stayed in New York and whatever, and they were successful. And I got a lot of satisfaction out of that, you know. It kind of fueled my soul to know that I was helping these people do something that I had been so passionate about as a younger person. And now I was in a different phase of life, right? So even with the school, there were other things that fell into my lap. Like I ended up doing a release. It was a video release. Remember the old video cassettes? They used to have cassettes that you could buy for kids, or you could buy a movie on it that we used to
Yeah.
use the VHS tapes. And I ended up doing a children's release through it was through Sony, where I was hired to be the choreographer, then ended up getting a little bit more involved. And it ended up being on all the shelves in like Target, Walmart, whatever, like right next to
Very
High School
nice.
Musical.
Hmm.
So it wasn't a project that today I'm proud of to a certain degree, just because it was a different time, it was a different place. There was a lot of
Hmm.
people that started to they wanted to kind of get involved with it, and they ended up adding more and more people to the project
Hmm.
because the people who were at the helm of the project were like, oh my gosh, this is coming out really good. This looks like Disney kids videos. This is amazing. Like I'm going to put my girlfriend in here and she's going to be a part of it. And I'm going to have my friend who does animation add animation. So it started ending up having too many pieces involved, like too
Sure.
many people, too many like hands in the pot kind of vibe. And it didn't turn out to be what the original plan had been. Hence, I learned a lot about the industry and about, the top of the industry with that situation. And we were this close to getting on Nickelodeon. It was between us and Hip Hop Harry that ended up on Nickelodeon. So I started to kind of get involved that way. But at the same time, a lot of my students, if they were talented enough, it didn't matter what age they were. If they were younger, like that 3 to 6 age, or if they were older, if I felt like, wow, this child has something special, there's something, they're passionate about this, they have an affinity for whatever it was, acting, singing, dancing, or all three, I would kind of take the parents and give them a phone call and say, listen, I'm connected to this industry. Do you have interest? Because if you do, or if you're interested at any time,
Hmm.
I am happy to help you and guide you and teach you how to do this safely and how to understand this so that you can support your child. And that ended up becoming something a little bit more later because my children now were a little bit older. They were 10, 6, and I had just had my third boy. I have three boys. I just had the third one. He was 8 months old. And the older one he said to me, why can't I be on the cover of a magazine like Lindsay? Because he had a friend in one of the classes at the school. And the boys did sports. They did everything. They did your
Hmm.
typical living in a very rural area, trying all the different sports, soccer, baseball, football. My oldest wanted to do football, but I was afraid of that sport. I didn't want him to get hurt. So I
I don't
told
blame
him,
you. A lot of parents. Yeah.
like
Hmm.
I was like, I don't think I want you to do that. He ended up getting involved in lacrosse, which I came
Nice.
to find out was football with a weapon.
Hmm.
So that was a little crazy, but he was very good at it and very successful and did it in college as well. So they did all of that. But the oldest had said, I kind of want to do this. And if I backtrack for a second to when I had first found that Madison Avenue guidebook, I had gotten the three boys um, signed when they were very young, again, um, an agent. I had sent all because my son, the oldest, wanted to do this. I said, okay, I'm going to use this book. I'm going to do what I do for my teachers and these other clients I had, and I'm going to see if we can kind of try this. So at 10, 6, and 8 months old, they were offered a contract with Ford. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Anybody who is of a certain age knows Ford Modeling Agency. Um, and they also were offered a contract with Gilla Roos at the time. And again, anybody who was involved back then would know those names. Gilla Roos gave us an opportunity to do a little bit more commercial work.
Mm.
It was print modeling, so commercial print. It wasn't like a runway. Like there's a difference between print work and modeling. It's not the runway designer kind of vibe work. It was more commercial print for magazines, catalogs, books. Like my oldest son did a book for McGraw-Hill where they needed children who were 10, 11, 12 to be playing with math manipulatives, they called them, when they're teaching them math. And they were taking photos of the kids with the different items that they were showing in the math book. So it was a McGraw-Hill math book series for public schools. And we don't have a copy of it, by the way. They
Oh
never,
no.
they don't
Okay.
share that stuff. Yeah, yeah. You don't really get copies of things and whatever. You have to hunt them down if you want them. But yeah, so he did that. And then the 6-year-old at the time did a couple of things for Nickelodeon magazine. It was all just kind of like playing. We were dabbling. I was like, okay,
Hmm.
I have these 3 boys. The agency was very interested because there were 3 boys and 1 parent, and they were 5 years apart on
Mm.
both sides, on both ends. So it was a benefit to them to be like, yes, come to the J.C. Penney, catalog shoot. We've got a baby and we've got a 6-year-old and we've got a 10, almost 11-year-old. So we did a little bit of that. And then after about a year and a half, I had to let the contract peter out because I had to go back into my schools and be more proactive
Hmm.
in working with the schools again. Because at the time I had managers in both locations who were kind of running them, and I was running it from afar on my computer.
Ah, okay.
So time went by, and I was still doing work, doing choreography for colleges, for community theater, for regional theaters. I was still getting thrown all of these different things. And I basically was saying yes to those things. They worked out with the family life, with running the kids and running the businesses. Um, and then when the last 2 were 15 and 10. So now the 8 month old, excuse me, is now 10. Um, and the teachers at my school had now really become all Broadway performers, television actors. They were people who were all in the unions working.
Hmm.
And they said to me, Leesa, you are out of your mind. Why aren't you calling for the 15-year-old? His name is
Hmm.
Kurt, Kurt. Why are you not calling for him? You're getting all these kids agents, you're helping them work in the industry or dabble in it or just kind of try it out and see if it's something they want to do. You're teaching all these parents how to do this kind of in the back room on the slide because I honestly, I didn't want people putting headshots and pictures of their kids in my cart in the shop right when I'm
Hmm.
trying to get through the grocery store with
Yeah,
3 boys.
good
Do you know
point.
what I mean?
Hmm.
So I didn't want to do that. So I kind of did it in the back room. So they were like, you're crazy. You need to be calling for this 15-year-old. So I took a deep breath and I was like, okay, am I going to get back into this world again and do it? Oh my gosh, if I'm going to do it this time, I'm going to do it like 300%, no messing
Hmm.
around. And I talked to him, he wanted to do it. And I remember it like it was yesterday, picking up that phone because I think I was sweating all over. Like, okay, not that I was that worried about it. I wasn't
Hmm.
that concerned. I was just, let me just see if I'm worried about this. Okay. Just, I was just thinking, okay, running back and forth to New York City, doing the thing, like, am I going to be able to handle this? And my husband was helpful, but just to a very small degree. It was really hard for him with work and what he did and whatever. So it was really up to me, and it was my world. So I ended up calling a manager. Shirley Grant Management was the top youth management company on the East Coast. So I thought, if I'm going to do this again, I'm going to go with a manager. And there was a
Hmm.
reason that I did that because a manager can get you through many different agencies to get to a casting, to get into a casting office and be seen for things. So I felt like, okay, rather than limiting my the boys' opportunities, I and going with an agent similar to when we were with Gila Roos, which was just commercial print and some commercial work, like video work for, commercials for TV. Let me really dive into this and get soaking wet. Like it's time. So we went with Shirley Grant, and when we went for the interview, at that time on the phone, they said, "Do you have any other children?" And I said, "Yes, I have a 10-year-old boy." And of course and I just said it casual. I was like, "Yeah, I have a 10-year-old, like no big deal." And they said, "Can you bring him as well? We'd like to interview him as well." So the rest is kind of history because
Hmm.
within a month to 3 months, they were doing commercials. They were auditioning for TV, for film, for brand new series, for Broadway. Kurt got to audition for Spring Awakening, the original Broadway cast, like right off the bat. That immediately Kevin, who was the 10-year-old at the time, because he was in that sweet spot for
Hmm.
children, which is like for boys, it's like 9 to 13. For girls, it's like 8 to 12 or when they begin developing. They're needed, right? Like if I'm doing a
Hmm.
McDonald's commercial and I need a family, I'm
Yeah,
going to have
of
a
course.
mom and a dad and a
Hmm.
teenager, and then I'm going to have a child. And they don't want to go too young with children because then it's harder for them to remember their lines, whatever they're going to say, whatever they're going to do. The
Hmm.
attention span is short or whatever. So they're always looking for older to play younger when it comes to youth. So he was in that sweet spot. Kurt, on the other hand, was 15, soon to turn 16,
Hmm.
which when you're 16 or 17, I don't know if you're aware of this, many producers, productions, directors want to hire 18 plus to
Mm,
play
okay.
16, 17, 15 even. And it's a little bit harder for TV and film, but Kurt, as he was moving through the industry at 21, he was doing commercial work for toys that were being sold to 10 to 12-year-olds for video games and for Nerf guns. You know what I mean? Like those
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah,
things.
I know exactly what you mean.
So even though he was older, and on Broadway, if you look at Broadway casts, some like Mean Girls on Broadway. My son Kevin was in the original Broadway cast of Mean Girls on Broadway.
Nice.
There were there were ensemble members who were 33, 34, 35 playing 15, 16, 17. So it's a little bit of a struggle when you're 15, 16 to get started. But this was more about the boys wanted to do it, even though they were
Hmm.
still doing sports. They wanted to
Sure.
do it. They enjoyed it. It was a special time with me where they got me alone, like to them, which we had those times because as a parent, I think you have to balance all of that, right? But we it was definitely a very special time with them. The teen Kurt wanted to do a lot on his own. He was like, I'll get on the train and go by myself. I want to go by myself. I'll get on the bus and go by myself, which he learned to do and became very successful at it. He ended up at that age doing, like I'm saying, a lot of commercial work for younger, playing younger. And he was the voice of the new, I don't know if you know, the Speed Racer cartoon that we all
Okay,
watched.
yeah, the newer one.
There,
Okay.
the newer one, he was the voice
Hmm.
of Speed, which was a very exciting
Nice.
thing for him. And he did a lot of like PSA commercials for like anti-drugs, say no to
Oh,
drugs, like that
yes.
type of
Okay.
stuff he
Hmm.
was able to do. Kevin, on the other hand, being in that sweet spot, ended up on 3 different soap operas. He was a regular on As the World Turns as a
Hmm.
child, playing a child. He ended up being offered Tarzan, the musical, as a replacement. The original 3 boys that they had hired to rotate in the role got too tall.
Ah,
So he
okay.
was going to go in as a replacement. He had a rehearsal start date and a performance start date. And he was in rehearsals and they decided they were going to close the show. So he never actually went on as young Tarzan in Tarzan, which he really wanted because he loved the music. You
Hmm.
know, as a kid, you kind of that's the vibe. It's more of a fun thing. And honestly, he ended up in how the original cast of How the Grinch Stole Christmas that year, which was the first year that they had that show. So he ended up
Oh,
doing a short
nice.
run for like 10 and a half weeks or 12 weeks, whatever it was, in New York, which was his Broadway debut as a child. And he loved it. And I was very much about, at the time, I was very much about checking in, you know? So I
Hmm.
would say to him, we need to have a meeting, like where I'm your manager, pseudo manager, and you're the talent. And you can pick when that meeting's going to be. You know, like if you're tired after school, we can do it a different time. You can pick when it is, but we need to talk about something because they're interested in you for this project. Do you feel like you want to do it? You know, like I would engage him in that so he felt like
Hmm.
these were his choices. And about every 3 months, I checked in with them to see if they wanted to keep doing it. You know, like it wasn't
Nice.
about it wasn't about the money at all for me. So getting back to my side of all of this, what ended up happening with a lot of the projects that the boys booked and auditioned for, the people at the helm, so the creatives involved in the projects, they I don't know how to explain it. I would be in the area, right? I would either be in the holding tank with the parents or I would be nearby at a hotel running my business from my computer. But I would have conversations with them. And because I was in the industry myself, I had auditioned for some things when I was younger on my own, trying to dabble in it when the city was a mess that I was talking about earlier,
Hmm.
but then decided to head in the producing, directing direction. Um, but they would engage with me. Do you know what I mean? They would say, "Oh, you can come over here," or "Why don't you sit here?" Or "We have this extra room in the building and it
Hmm.
just has some chairs in it. Why don't you just do your work there?" And so, and I wasn't a crazy stage mother, you know? So anybody out there listening, if you're a crazy stage mother, they're going to see you coming a mile
Hmm.
away and
Yeah.
you're going to ruin it for your kids and their opportunities. You truly have to be just chill about things because the kids are doing the thing. They're in front of the camera or they're doing their voiceover work or they're dancing, whatever it is. It's about them.
Yeah.
But what happened was there were times when I don't want to say who I don't want to say who the project was for, but there was a project where they put the parents on a different floor, and the kids were in rehearsal. You know, so they were on another floor of the building, and they had a problem with the choreographer. And all of a
Okay.
sudden, my son is calling me. I had a BlackBerry at the time when those were like the thing.
Sure.
And he's messaging me and he's like, "Mom, can you come up here? Everything's fine. I'm okay, but they're having a problem with the choreographer." They let the choreographer go. It didn't work
Hmm.
out. And I ended up getting hired in that moment to do choreography for the project for these
Unreal.
children.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So that you could just extrapolate that data, but that's kind of what ended up happening. Like I did end up doing a lot of work. Um, I ended up learning a whole lot about both sides of the industry, about how it is to be an adult trying to get an agent or a manager and work in the business, how to develop the resume so that it's palatable to the agents and managers so that you can get into these top level auditions. And then I learned the parent side of having a child or a minor in the industry as well, and how to navigate that appropriately. And today, both of the boys are successful adults in the industry. They stayed, they did not
Very nice.
end up, you know, dropping out or whatever. They are both in the industry,
Hmm.
um, and quite successful in the industry. And then, crazy enough, in 2012, I ended up doing choreography for Madonna's 2012 world tour.
Oh, wow.
Another
Okay.
thing that dropped into my lap,
Hmm.
which is a crazy story how that happened. I don't know if you want me to tell you how that. I mean,
Yeah,
people
go
can
for it, of course.
people can learn from this, right? So if there
Hmm.
are listeners out there that always wanted to do this and ended up going in another direction And honestly, there are a lot of stories of people who pivot at an older age and end up successful. Jessica Vosk is a perfect example of somebody who, she was an accountant and worked downtown on Wall Street and just said one day, I'm going to pursue this. And, turn around today and she's a huge, huge star on Broadway with that amazing voice of hers. But what happened was when both the boys were very, very talented in the dance realm. Kurt more so in tap, but knew all the genres. They knew how to lift, like be able to lift girls, because that's a skill. Anybody out there with boys who dance, make sure they learn how to lift, how to do lifts and partner. So they both could partner. Kurt was more of a tap dancer. Kevin was more of hip hop. He also was a good
Hmm.
tap dancer, but he was a hip hop guy. And so what ended up happening was they were with Shirley Grant Management. We were going through many different agents to get to auditions as per how the industry works. I wanted them to have opportunities in the dance realm as an isolated skill. So I ended up reaching out to Clear Talent Group, which is bicoastal, very
Hmm.
big agency for dance. And ultimately, they ended up signing both of the boys for dance. And I was able to work that out with the manager and with the agents they were going through. And sometimes you have to, in those cases, whether you're an adult performer or you're a parent of a minor doing this, you do have to put on your big boy pants or your big girl pants and like be able to professionally handle having multiple agents because it's not something that is common.
Hmm.
So because of the dance aspect, everyone was willing to work together to make this work. So when we went in for the interview, um, I remember, and I don't remember why I had my resume with me. It may have been something else I was doing. It was probably something director producery that I happened to have, or maybe I just had it in the folder with because I had to give the kids the folder. Take the folder. You're going into the
Hmm.
interview to be interviewed, and they need to see all these materials. So when we went to leave, we were walking out of the office. The kids came out of the interview and they handed me the folder. And I was talking to the person at the desk who was, I believe, a college intern. And I said to him, "Oh, here's their resumes because the agent asked that the resumes were dropped off at the desk."
Hmm.
And as I opened the folder, mine was there. And I said, "Oh, you know what? Not for nothing, just for shits and giggles. Here, do you want to take mine too, just for the hell of it? Like, I also work in the industry. I do more choreo and directing, producing, and that kind of thing. But just whatever. If he wants to see what it is that I do, so he understands that I have a background. I'm not going to be one of those crazy mothers I mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
So
Exactly.
what happened was he put my information into the computer because he was an intern. So he just was
Hmm.
da 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 da. I didn't know that. I had no idea. I figured it would end up in the circular file. So years later, I get a phone call from Clear Talent Group, and I'm thinking it's for the kids. No, it was for me. They wanted me to do a self tape audition for choreography for a major artist for their tour. That's all I knew.
Hmm.
So of course my kids thought that was great because I was in New York at the time. So we're coming home. It's late at night. It's like 9:30 at night, and I'm like, we have to stop at the school. We had to stop at the studio. So we're stopping at the studio, and of course Kevin, who was younger, he was like, "Oh, good. Now I get to have you stand in front of the camera to do a self-tape audition." And he thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. So he was directing me to do what I needed to do for that. And a few days later, I got the call in the car and they said, "Hey, you booked it. Can you be in New York for 10 days? The project is very stealth and you
Hmm.
really can't talk about it. I'll send you the information or call you with it because I don't even want to type it anywhere." And I hung up and I said, "Oh, great, I got the gig." And I said to my husband, "I got the gig." And he was like, "Who was it with?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even ask that. I forgot to ask because you're a busy
Yeah, of
parent, like running kids
course.
all over, doing all the things. I didn't even ask." So I called them back and they're like, it's Madonna. And I was like, I honestly think I felt like I was going to throw up at the time. I was like, okay, yeah. And a couple weeks later, I was, in rehearsal doing that thing. But all of these things cumulatively, and the fact that I had an academic degree, you know what I mean? And an
Hmm.
understanding of how to, I also was an avid reader. Do you know what I mean? I
Oh
love to
yeah, same
read.
here.
You
Hmm.
know what I mean? I love to read all of the publications or the books at the time that had to do with, you know, how to win friends and influence people.
Oh,
Come
same
on.
here. I got a copy of it right over here.
Yeah, I got one
Yeah.
sitting behind me
Hmm.
because I used to give it to my teachers to read. And I had my kids read it when they were in junior high. And I have it on the book list and I give it to a lot of my clients along with a lot of other books that I think help them, you know, with their process and with what they need to do, depending on what their needs are and, all that working with them. So yeah, so that's pretty much the story, And then what ended up happening when the kids got signed the second time. So when Kurt and Kevin at 15 and 10 got signed, they were very, very involved in my school. So I had to bring all the parents together that were interested and say, I brought them all in to the big dance room and I said, listen, this is what I'm doing. The kids got signed. We're going to do this, but don't worry. The boys are still going to be very involved in the performance with all of you because at the time I offered dance to male clients for free.
Oh, nice.
So you think you could dance, hadn't really developed, it wasn't really a thing yet.
Hmm.
So it was free for boys. The boys didn't pay for anything at the time. Um, so it was a mix of boys and girls parents. And I explained to them about the industry and what I did. And I said to them, I'll help you. If you're interested, I will help you. And I'll teach you about this, and you can do the exact same thing. Come with me. They were all afraid. I had like maybe one or two slightly interested at the time. Um, and then, of course, Kevin's in a Broadway show. Kevin's on a soap opera. They're seeing Kurt in commercials, which we kept very separate. Like we didn't talk about it. We didn't brag about it. They didn't talk about it at school. Like they kept it very, very separate. Um, just because you didn't know, sadly, it's a gatekeeper type field for whatever reason. There's this intrigue, right? Like if you had a kid and you knew that they really wanted to be a doctor,
Hmm.
there's a game plan, right? There's a map. Like
Exactly.
you know what you're going to do. They're going to go to school and they're going to major in, I don't know, biochemistry, something. And then they're going to go, you know, get their master's, go to med school. They're going to get matched at some point and they have a career. And I feel like this industry, because of the mystique of it, um, there's not that information isn't out there. Hence the reason I do what I do now. So that was the start of all of it, because then that meeting turned into the seminar that I was doing. And I
Hmm.
was doing it in intimate settings with printed materials in a binder. And I was able to really organize all of it, how the industry works, all the laws surrounding um, minors in the industry, the work permit information, how to keep your child safe, how to, watch out for scams and all of those kind of things, and make sure that you understand how the industry works, which should be out there for all of us to read and understand. I don't know why it's not. And sadly, if you don't mind me bringing up, you have these documentaries on Netflix, whatever, these streaming platforms that are obviously they're bringing to light these terrible situations that happen to minors over the
Hmm.
past how many years. But if you look at all of those instances, even if you go way back to
Hmm.
Shirley Temple or to Jackie Coogan and all the things that happened, in really all of the cases, even Lindsay Lohan, you go all the way
Hmm.
from back then till now. and even what happened with the Nickelodeon kids. Each problem stemmed from parents that were not grounded, that
Hmm.
were either
Yeah.
all about the money, they saw it as like, you know, it was like a money grab,
Hmm.
or they just were not stable in who they were themselves, and they let these things happen, in my opinion. Yes, they were bad people that I'm sure in some of the cases that shouldn't have been doing what they were doing, obviously.
Hmm.
But it happens in gymnastics. It happens in all sports, even football. Like
Sure.
you hear it all the time, but it's brought to light so much in such a, I think they're almost exploiting the story to make
Hmm.
money. They're
Yeah, I
obviously
know
wanting to,
exactly what you mean.
you know what I mean? Like they're giving us the information so that the general public can be safe with their children and realize these things happen, and you need to open your eyes to that this happens. But it happens with children in every anything that they get involved in, any activity. You have to
Hmm.
be careful. But what I don't like is that they make it seem like that is 100% the situation for every child who's involved. And I can tell you, I have helped hundreds of parents
Hmm.
with children dabble in this industry, and they will tell you how their children learned so much, grew in so many positive
Exactly.
ways as an individual,
Hmm.
learned things that they would never learn in public school, about how to handle themselves, about like just professionalism, even just being able to go up to someone that they just met and say hello and look them in the eye and be appropriate in that moment. Um, that they learned. And many of them, if not all of them, have said their children wouldn't be as successful as they are today in their chosen careers if it hadn't been for this extracurricular activity that they
Hmm.
got involved in as a child or teen, that just happened to have a little icing on the cake when they made some money doing it. Um, it's I don't know. It's something that continues to kind of bother me, because I feel like, as when I was a child, I knew that I had an affinity for this. I knew that I enjoyed it so much. And if I knew that I could have gone to school for this, that would have been my choice to do it
Hmm.
as a career. Um, and I'm completely okay with who I am. I was put here to help other people. I was put here to lift people up, just like you and what you were telling me about, what you're doing with your podcast, which I think is
Hmm.
amazing. Um, yeah, that's why I'm here. And I chose and choose to do that. So anyway, so I ended up doing this seminar. I kept it really small. I had some agent friends from some pretty big agencies in New York City want me to do it in a very large scale. Like do it at the at a hotel in a ballroom in front of hundreds of people, but that felt scammy to me. I don't want to do it in front. I don't
Sure.
want to
Yeah,
do
I know
that. You
exactly
know
what
what I
you
mean?
mean. Hmm.
Excuse me. I would rather work one on one with people, which is more what I do now, is work one on one. I can say that through when COVID, the pandemic, I feel like everybody's like, what happened before the pandemic and what
Hmm.
happened after the
Sure.
pandemic? There's this like
Hmm.
baseline we have. Um, yeah, so during the pandemic, everything obviously went online. My programs went online. I had the understanding enough to understand the technology, a lot more than a lot of my friends and counterparts with, performing arts schools or theaters or whatever. And we ended up going online. And then my seminar turned into a webinar. And then the
Okay.
webinar turned into my online courses that now I
Wow.
have out online, and where people can get a lot of free information. Like even through my social media, I give out so much free information, guideline, like actual guides that they can just sign up for, and I send them to them. Checklists, like I have this comprehensive career checklist, the comprehensive career checklist that I've just had it out for maybe a month. But I'm telling you, whether you are like an adult wanting to do this, like Mark, I'll send you one if you think you want to jump back into this industry, because It has everything on there. All you have to
Mm-hmm.
do is just go step by step by step and do exactly what this checklist says to do. And certainly if you need help, I'm here to help. People get in touch with me and work
Sure.
with me one-on-one to do that. But
Mm-hmm.
you can take that and run with it. And I've had people get involved with the course or get involved with, just my free stuff that I give away. And following me on Instagram, on Facebook, and they are very successful, very successful. Um, yeah. One of my clients, I just had a couple of conversations with her a few years ago. Her daughter was young.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she listened to everything I have out there online, got all my free stuff, and her daughter ended up starring as young Anna in the national tour of Frozen.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
all about, I can't I can't say it enough. It's all about, I have to say networking
Mm-hmm.
because that map isn't there. I'm
Exactly.
trying to provide that map now. I'm trying to provide the roadmap, the checklist, this is how you do this. Um, Obviously the training has to be there. There has to be some kind of training. But I've also had clients I just had somebody signed that I got signed to a bicoastal agency who had no background in acting, no background in voice, and no background in dance. They just love movies, they love TV, they love all these, these network series that are out there, and they just wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we did all the things that we needed to do to provide the materials to the agents and sent everything out. And he ended up with 3 interviews and got signed to bicoastal representation. It was crazy. At Yeah, a young adult, and it's
Mm-hmm.
hard because I think the even the university programs who are trying to keep up, I mean, I give them credit, they're trying to keep up with what's going on because since COVID, everything went, as far as auditions go, everything pivoted to self tapes. So
Exactly.
you
Yep.
can be where you are anywhere in the world and send in a self tape
Mm-hmm.
and audition for things. There's ways of doing it, as you know, because you had said you dabbled in it a little bit yourself.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so now I feel like, I don't know, before the pandemic, I knew we were gonna get into this self-tape situation where everything self-tapes. I saw the handwriting on the wall that it was
Mm-hmm.
coming. I just didn't realize how quick it was gonna be here. But because we used to you traveled to your manager, your agent, and they would tape you. That
Mm-hmm.
if they didn't want to see you in the city, so if they didn't want to see you in New York or LA or Atlanta or whatever, at the casting office, it had started happening prior to COVID, where they would ask you, drive in, and we need to film you in our office and then we'll send it out. But then with the pandemic, it just locked all of these self tapes in. And now you have to not only, if you want to be a stage actor, you have to also be a film and TV actor so that you can
Mm-hmm.
present yourself well in your self tapes. You are the director, the producer, the editor, the cinematographer.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have all those skills. But we also, on the other side of that, we also have cell phones that do a lot for us, right?
That's a
Makes it
really
real
good point. Yeah, especially in
makes it
today's
so
times.
easy. Yeah, it makes it so easy to do. And there's a lot of little shortcuts and there's a lot of ways that you can there's a lot of ways that you can use less of your time and it can cost you less money to do this and get into this business.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with the minutia of what you have to prepare. Um, to be able to send your assets. Because basically, what you're doing, if you want me to go in this direction, I don't know if you want me to go in this direction.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So, like, if you are going to send all your materials to an agent or a manager for representation, you need to have assets. So, you need a headshot, you need a resume, you need videos, self tapes of you executing scene work So you need access to some scripts, some little, the sides, they call them if you're not in the industry. A
Hmm.
little tiny piece of the script is called a side, and they give you sides for a character, and they'll give you a character description. And then you have to make strong choices in your acting moments on film. You have to have someone off camera who's reading opposite of you. And you're basically doing the scene the way it would look if you were doing it, for real. So you need those. And then if you're a vocalist, if you can sing or your child can sing, you need some videos of them doing a 16 bar cut or a 32 bar cut of various songs that show off the quality of their voice. So something maybe that's up tempo, something that's more like a ballad, and that would be for a Broadway tune. So you'd want like Broadway up tempo, Broadway ballad, a pop up tempo, a pop Broadway, I mean a pop ballad. Um, so you want at least 3 or 4 little snippets of songs that you can sing or that your child or teen can sing. Um, and then if they are dancers and you can put a minute together of whatever their best genre is, if they're a tap dancer or if they do contemporary or ballet, whatever it is that they do well, have a little clip of that of them alone, not like from the dance recital, like don't do the
Hmm.
dad was in the
No.
audience filming, but something where it's them by themselves. And once you have all of those assets, and if you can create those assets so that they sit in the top 1 to 3% of what agents and managers see, and on the other side of it, if you are, or your child or teen is, the type that agent or management company needs on their roster, you are going to end up with an interview.
Hmm.
And once you get an interview, they're not going to ask you to come in for the interview unless they want to sign you, like an
Hmm.
agent
A
or
good point.
management, because they're not going to waste their time. They don't want to
No.
waste your time. They're not going to waste their time because I tell all my clients, what are they doing? What is an agent doing all day long? They're looking at breakdowns and they're trying to match those breakdowns. So the description of the character that casting needs, they're trying to match one of their clients to that breakdown. And then they're trying to get that client to be able to, at this point in time, send a self tape in and be available for that project because that's the only way they make money.
Hmm.
They don't make money any other way. And for those of you out there that might not, understand or know the industry, an agent can only take 10% of your gross. That's it. So if you're going to, say, do a small regional commercial that's maybe going to run for a short amount of time, and maybe it's only going to be on cable networks, um, maybe your child's getting paid $500 for that. So maybe they're getting paid less than that if it's something super small. So agents and managers want you to develop your resume. They're going to help develop that resume, especially if you're with a manager, because they want you to be as palatable as possible to casting people so they can put food on their table and put a roof over their head.
Hmm.
So when you
Yeah.
take the emotion, and this is what I do throughout my program and what I have done with people all these years, if you take the emotion out of it, right? Because we're all artists. So we're all very emotional, and that's what we're supposed to be, right? We're supposed to be able to, I don't know, cry on cue, get angry
Hmm.
in a split second, all of those things. But if you take that out of the equation and you look at and really think about what it's like to be an agent, like put yourself in their shoes. Put yourself in the casting person's shoes. Put yourself in the producer's shoes. Like I have stories I could go on forever about where people were inappropriate and then ended up not continuing with the project because they didn't understand that this is your lane. You need to be
Hmm.
staying in this lane. Understand what the producer does. Understand what casting is doing. What are their responsibilities? What are their limitations? So when you look at an agent and you really start to think about what are they doing, That's what they're doing all week. And then they're handling contract agreements. When one of their clients books something, they're having to, coordinate all of that. And they're basically trying to get you in the right place at the right time and where you need to be, whether that's on your way to booking something or after you've booked something.
Hmm.
And they only get 10% of whatever you're making. So that's not a lot of money in the big scheme of things until you really reach higher level projects. So um, when you understand that, you can see that they're not going to spend a lot of time every single week um, looking for new talent. They're
No.
not going to
Hmm.
spend a lot of time doing that, right? So a lot of the agencies have on their website a place where you can submit for representation, But how many submissions are they getting every week? And when do they have time to look at these? Is your submission going to get opened? Is somebody
Hmm.
going to look at it? So I have some very specific ways that I will set up the email that's sent or let's call it a cover letter if it was a hard copy being sent, or if you're submitting through an online database or whatever, like an online form on the agent's website that you can copy and paste in there. But it's set up very, very specifically to get them to open that email, to get them
Okay.
to open yours. And it has to do with what assets are you putting in there? How are you writing your intro? It needs to be skimmable. It can't be, all emotional because again, here we go back to we're artists. We want to say, oh, this is what I
Hmm.
love to do. And I went to school for this and I had this professor who just inspired me. And this is what I'm looking for. And I want to be this kind of actor. Like they know that if you're submitting for them, right? They know all those things. They don't need to hear all that. They just want boom, 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 boom. Who is this person? What can this person provide to me? Do they have like a decent headshot? We could talk about headshots too if you want, because I have a pet peeve in regard to headshots. But is the headshot a decent headshot? Like
Hmm.
what's really
Yeah.
happening here? And how ready is this person for me to look at that breakdown? Now they're the right fit. I'm going to now call them, get them to go to this audition or have casting look at them and decide whether casting wants to see them or not. Are they ready? Are they ready? Like, do they understand enough of the industry based on what they sent me in their submission email? Like how ready do they look? Like it's very important. And I think I work with a lot of kids who are in college, a lot of like juniors in college, like I end up working with, or recent college graduates, and people who have graduated from school, been in school for acting, vocal performance, dance, or musical theater. Um, and some of them are floating around New York for 8, 10 years, just trying to dabble and do
Sure.
these little things. And they have survival jobs that became their full-time job. And then
Hmm.
it starts leaning into, is this a hobby or is this going to be a career? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And it's just because they got lost. They didn't get connected to the right training. They didn't get connected to the right people. What do they say? Show me your friends and I'll show you who you're going to be. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Not
Yeah.
that whole vibe. I don't know. But just like anything else, like if I don't know, if I became a lawyer, I would definitely spend time hanging out with other lawyers who I'm going to learn from, who I'm going to connect to other, you know, clients through. That's all part of finding success, I think, in a career. And I think for some reason, because this industry is what it is,
Hmm.
and there's not a lot of open doors out there, we need to get those doors open for people, which is really what I'm trying to do?
Exactly. And we need more people like you out there, doing what you're doing.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's funny that you say that because there's there are a lot of people in the industry that have been successful, whether that's with their children as minors or for themselves as adults. And they ended up landing with, let's say, as an example, a voice teacher
Hmm.
in New York City, which now, you know, we have Zoom, we have all these different means. You can, if you live in wherever in the Midwest or in a rural area, you can get in contact with top industry professionals so your child isn't taking voice lessons with, you know, somebody who's not going to mean anything on their resume when they're trying
Exactly.
to get
Hmm.
into college
No name
or
talent. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, um, yeah, so there are some voice teachers, acting coaches, dance teachers who are connected and who are willing and have the time to help. And that's how a lot of people end up in the industry. And I have some of my son Kevin was in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story movie,
Oh.
and he played one of the Jets in the film. And we had a bunch of the guys over to our home during a break in the filming, which was crazy and really fun. They had a great time out here in the country. But um, just talking to some of them about they knew what I was doing for a living, but some of them did not know how they landed in the industry. They're like, I don't really know how I ended up here. Like this person found me or saw me at a dance competition and talked to me, or I was singing at this cabaret in my town and somebody's uncle happened to be, they just have no idea.
Yeah.
So they were saying to me, even if they had a child or a young adult teen, like their own offspring that wanted to do this, they could connect them only because they could connect them to who they're connected to now. They would have no idea what to do with a child or with a teen or to get people where they needed to be other than to go, oh, I took voice lessons with this teacher, let's take voice lessons there. And many of the voice acting and dance teachers don't have time. They're so busy teaching voice and focusing on that they don't have time to really educate people as to how to really go about it. But some do. I can say some do on both coasts. But anyway,
Yeah.
we're running long here. You good with the
No,
timing?
yeah, I'm great with the time. In wrapping up, what would you suggest? Obviously, if someone wants to reach out to you, what would they do? But more, if they're like in an area not like New York City, how would they find the resources?
Okay, that's a really good question. Yeah. They can, if they want to, can I ask you, do you edit this?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, okay, good. I just want to make sure. Can you hear the dog barking?
No, not at all.
Oh, beautiful. All right, I'm glad because
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
I'm babysitting my son Kurt's dog,
Mm,
and he just
okay.
decided to start barking for some reason. I
No,
don't
no,
know
I couldn't
why.
hear it at all. We're good. Yeah.
I think there's probably someone walking down the street, a friend, a
Okay.
doggy friend walking down the street.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so if someone lived in the rural areas and they wanted to find out more about how to do this,
Hmm.
um, they can absolutely go online. And if they want to reach out to me, I can help them. They can go to my website, which is lbctalent.com. Um, they can also follow me on Instagram at Leesa Csolak and an underscore mark, but I'll spell that. It's Leesa, S like Sam, Olak, and then underscore on Instagram. And they can find me on Facebook. My name is got such an unusual spelling that people
Hmm.
really, if they understand how to spell my name, they really have no problems finding me. And I'm happy to guide them in the right directions. If they are in a rural area and they don't have training, my suggestion would be to look for, let's say, an acting school or a theater
Hmm.
program in their area. And they should look at the teachers or the director's bios. Like find a theater school, or if it's dance, or if it's vocal training, find a school that has teachers who have been in the industry, even if there's only
Hmm.
one teacher there or two teachers there that have been in the industry. I had a client that had gotten in touch with me a couple years ago, and they were from Florida. And their son was 15, and he was a very good actor and had a good look and all that for his age. But they really didn't have the time based on their work schedules and the financial backing to be able to get him with top industry instructors via, say, Zoom or whatever, like New York,
Hmm.
LA people as yet.
Sure.
So the suggestion at the time was let's find an acting school that has someone who has worked in the industry. And the mom there was some confusion for the mom. So I said, I'll do it for you. It's not a big deal. Take me like 10 minutes. I got you. So I just went online and I found an acting school that was a half an hour from their home that was run by a single acting teacher who had been in the industry her entire life in LA at the top of the industry, who
Hmm.
settled in Florida to retire and was teaching acting in a very small, like small setting and highly connected to the industry. I was
Oh,
like,
very
that's where to take
nice.
your
Oh
son.
yeah, for
You
sure.
know what I mean?
Hmm.
But to give your kids, to give yourself an opportunity to try these things, to like kind of get an idea of if you have an affinity for it, if you like it, um, and and just kind of get exposed to what it's like to be on stage. Absolutely, community theater, school programs are free in most cases with public school. It's not going to cost you any
Hmm.
money to do that. If you're someone who you already see the talent in your child, teen, or young adult, and they're already on their way in the industry, definitely connect to people in the industry. Now, what I do, people also call me a connector because that's what I help people do. I'll connect them, and trust me, I don't get kicks from anybody. It's not about that. It's not about the money. I just connect you or people, whoever it is. I can assess what it is that they're doing. Like, okay, send me a 32 bar cut of your son or daughter singing, or send me the assets that your college student has put together while they've been in school and what they're planning on sending to agents, managers, whatever. And I can look at it and go, you know what? You're not in that 1 to 3% that I spoke of. You're just not.
Hmm.
We need to get you with these people. Yes, you could keep the teacher you have now that you're training, that you've been training with for years if you want, but maybe see them once every 6 weeks. And maybe let's talk about this person in New York, this person in LA, this person in London, who your child can work with and do as many lessons as you want in a row, or they can do it very quickly and get
Hmm.
them up to the level they need to be, or they can choose to maybe spread it out over time. Because I've had people who said, you know what, I need 8 months. I am not ready to do this now. I need time. And there's always going to be another TV show that's going to be cast. There's always going to be another Broadway show that's cast. There's always going to be another
Hmm.
commercial where they need you and your type. There's always going to be, it seems like there's always going to be another episode of, Law and Order SVU. I mean, all of that just seems to keep,
Exactly.
you
Hmm.
know what I mean? So you have to really look at I think as a parent supporting your child, you have to look at your
Hmm.
lifestyle, your financial situation, your budget that you would have, if any, and any time constraints you have, and then make a plan, an actionable plan that you're going to act on to give them every opportunity that they could possibly have to be able to, do this as a career. But
Hmm.
thousands of people do very successfully. So that's my world.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast as a guest. Such an incredible, resource, and what you're doing. The world needs more of people like you out there. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, so much
hmm.
for having me. I really enjoyed, and thanks for letting me explain so much. That was great.
Oh, it's perfect. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.